Our next speaker is Andres Rosas.
The metal bells tick back and forth as the clock bobbles up and down, rattling the table as it signals to me in panic that it's time for me to roll out of bed. Ignoring its dance, I bury my head deeper into the pillow and wrap myself tightly into the comfort of my blanket. I slam snooze in an attempt to finish the lingering pieces of my dream that I can still piece together as I picture myself bursting in excitement in Johannesburg, South Africa, as a player jumps into the fans after scoring the winning goal for his nation. Instead, it comes to an abrupt halt, as in the background, my dad is already making enough noise to wake up every hotel room around us, as nothing can put my dad in a worse mood than traveling. By 6:10, my dad is exploding and has now entered the ignoring stage where he does nothing but throw the suitcases around and pace the room. I don't help the situation when I ask what time our flight was, and I hear that's at 9:30. After hearing this, my smartass 8-year-old self began to calculate all the timing to precision and proceeded to explain that he is wrong and we could have slept longer. Telling my dad he's wrong is a tipping point, and now he's infuriated. My dad comes down just for a second as we say our goodbyes to my mom and my sisters as we leave them in Spain and get ready for our flight to South Africa. Rule number 1 of the soccer trips: only boys allowed. As I make myself comfortable in the leather-crammed seat and twist the small air vent above open, I can't help but smile as I recall the bedtime stories my dad would tell me about his many trips starting in 1994 as I prepare to start my own World Cup journey. Music plays softly through the cabin speakers, and me and my dad light up when we hear Waka Waka by Shakira, the official song of the 2010 World Cup. My dad's once dreadful mood has changed in an instant, as nothing brings him more joy than the World Cup. After getting off the long flight, we make our way to the hotel in Cape Town to meet the rest of the group. It was intimidating at first, being the only child surrounded by 12 men in their 30s and 40s, ranging from relatives to my father and uncle's high school friends. However, I would come to realize that most of them acted like children anyway. Many times it felt as if they forgot that there was a 7-year-old child there, as I would constantly ask my dad what certain words meant, or to further explain the joke, which he would turn around with a quick basta, leave it be, or nada, nothing. Right off the bat, our journey got off to a quick start when one of the guys decided it'd be fun to visit a local petting zoo. This wasn't your typical Boston petting zoo, as instead, the furry farm animals were replaced by baby lions. From the moment we entered the cage, I knew this was not going to end very well. They had specifically told us not to make any fast movements. More specifically, no running and to be as quiet as possible, which I knew would be impossible for this group. I got us off to a hot start when 3 minutes in, I got startled by a lion that brushed from my leg, which in turn shocked me enough to scream and sprint towards the entrance. I was the first to be kicked out that day. Next, as my uncle begins to play with the lion, as if it's a dog, teasing it up and down, it snaps and has missed the toy and instead bit his hand. The lions were quite young, so thankfully it wasn't enough damage as there would have been no hospitals nearby to take him. Next, it's my elderly grandfather, who also thought it was a good idea to roughhouse with the lion. With a mighty push off its hind legs, the lion stood up with his massive paws and pushed him down until he began to roll across the dirt. This was followed by a message through the speaker system. Can the group in the cage please make their way to the exit immediately? This occurred on the first day, so you can imagine the events which took place in the following 2 weeks. I won't get into the entire 2 weeks. However, the next day, I went to my first game, which is still until this day one of the most memorable games I've been to. It was the quarterfinals, Uruguay versus Ghana, and Ghana was the final African team left in the World Cup. Every fan in the stadium was supporting Ghana that day, as many fans wore makarpas, a South African hand-painted sculpted wooden hat covered in bright colors and emblems to represent the nation. In the stadium, vuvuzelas blast through my ears, and the beat from thousands of djembe drums shake the stadium. Strangers hand me face paint, let me bang the drums, as many fans taught me their chance to support Ghana. If anyone remembers this game, they know the dramatic and exciting ending, which was determined in penalty kicks. However, it was not the soccer, but the fans, which I remember the most from that day. By the end, I'd come to the conclusion that the entire point of our trip was to experience these new cultures and the inner beauty of these unfamiliar nations. Yet, I would be mistaken. Fast forward 4 years, and the crew is now taking on the vibrant, colorful city of Rio de Janeiro in 2014 for the Brazil World Cup. The same lively crew arrived to cause mayhem, yet this time we were 10 instead of 12. My uncle's father-in-law, as well as one of the high school friends, had both passed away in the last 4 years after battling cancer. Although not there, they were in our thoughts as we remembered our most memorable stories with them, which brought endless laughter. It was one of the first moments that made me realize the strong bonds and friendships I had made, while reminding me to live in the present and cherish the moments I got to spend with my family and friends, as you never know when the last time you will hug them in joy while screaming goal at the top of your lungs. For me and many of the other members of the group, dinners especially were the place to be. On one of the first nights in Brazil, we had the night off, so there wasn't a game to attend. Therefore, we decided it would be a good idea to watch the games that night at a restaurant next door. To our surprise, when we got there, there was no TVs. So most of the guys started complaining and wanted to find a new place, but after realizing it'd be too much of a hassle, they decided that we would make do and stay there. Making the best of it meant they ordered an unhealthy amount of food for all 10 of us and lots of wine for the older guys. As the table began to pile up with wine bottles, it got louder and more disruptive. As if they weren't making enough noise already, my dad's cousin decided he needed to entertain me as I was the only kid. So he went to the counter and came back with gumballs to throw at the drunk man in the corner sound asleep who had his mouth wide open. Luckily, I missed all of them, as it could have ended very badly. Next, he decided he needed to sing karaoke. Therefore, went barreling to the waitress for a microphone. The waitress looked a bit puzzled at first, but in the end agrees, and the staff came out of the back with a speaker and microphone. He began his show, drunk out of his mind, going from table to table as the rest of us cheered him on and got the crowd on the feet. That night, we were the last ones out of the restaurant, being dragged out as the laughter and conversations could have lasted for hours. Once again, I thought I finally understood the real meaning behind our trips. It was the moments leading up to the game, the dinners, the city tours, and the trips to the local attractions that made the World Cup so special. 10 years later, I realized I still hadn't seen the entire picture. On my last trip to Russia in 2018, Peru qualified for the World Cup for the first time in 36 years. My dad is Peruvian and grew up in Peru until leaving for college in Canada during the height of terrorism in Peru. Visiting Peru 2 to 3 times a year growing up while being surrounded by 16 first cousins, of which 5 boys were my age and loved soccer, made the decision to support the Peruvian national team easy. For my dad and grandfather, it was soccer that strung the country together, keeping it from plummeting during the most frightening times where bombs rang in the night sky. So after 36 years of watching Peru not play in a World Cup and never being able to experience it in person, the time had finally come. It was an event that united the country like none other. We watched Peruvians from every corner of the country, every neighborhood, from Andes to the coast, forgetting about their differences and uniting around their team. What made this trip even more special was that it was most likely the last trip my dad would take with his father and my last trip with my grandfather. They had been to every World Cup together since 1994 and had only missed one, in 2014, which my grandfather had decided would be too much traveling for him. Yet the moment Peru qualified, he knew that one more trip was in his future and he could not miss this historic moment with his son and grandson and rest of the family. Walking through the Red Square in Moscow was like nothing any of us had ever experienced before. It felt as if we were still walking the streets of Lima. The white jersey with the red crisp stripe across the front lit up every corner, and we would run into someone we knew every couple of minutes. Alongside the jersey followed the chants and songs from the stadium ringing into the early hours of the night as many Russians asked for photos or videotaped us. We soon left Moscow and made our way to Saransk, Russia for Peru's first game, a city in the middle of nowhere, Russia. Arriving at a small motel where none of the doors locked, the TVs were small boxes from the 1900s, and a place where the police officers escorted us to the local grocery store. Yet none of this bothered anyone, as we were surrounded by Peruvians. Thousands of Peruvians had made the journey to Saransk, no matter their socioeconomic status, remortgaging their homes or selling cars, with no flights or hotels booked once in Russia. Ready to see where the journey would take them, outside in the streets, Peruvian grilled anticuchos, a classic Peruvian dish, sang and danced while I jumped up and down all night, showered in beer, while I was handed in food and drinks from people I had never met in my life, who were using all the money they had on the Peruvians around them. It was an experience that opened my eyes to the passion behind soccer what makes the impoverished developing country so special. By putting on a blanquirroja, I was now family to any Peruvian, family to a stranger I'd never met before. All differences were set aside as everyone looked out for one another, offering rides and places to sleep to those in need. My most distinct memory comes the following night when it was finally time for Peru to play its first game. The stadium was filled with thousands of Peruvians that night. All you could see was the red and white. Preparing for the national anthem, the stadium went silent for a second, and as the instrumental background begins, so does the singing. I'm sure many Russians remember that night, as you could hear the anthem be sung by everyone from miles away. To my left and right, wrapped around my arms, are my uncle, my dad, followed by my grandfather. He too sings, never slowing down or stopping to catch his breath, while tears stroll down their cheeks. It was the first time I'd ever seen my dad or grandfather cry as they finished belting the words and then hugging Peruvians around them and then hugging me. What I came to realize during my final trip in Russia was that these soccer trips were not just road trips. My grandfather and dad had a special relationship built around this tradition, and it has shaped how my dad has raised me. We weren't just going to watch soccer, but rather to spend meaningful time in family, something my grandfather had instilled in him ever since he was young. It was soccer that brought together the impoverished developing country, and it was the game that taught me to value family most. I'm not sure how many more trips I have with my grandfather, but I know he will continue his legacy and the tradition he started with his son for years to come. I know my father will continue making the trip every 4 years, no matter the circumstances, and will have me pushing him in a wheelchair around cities in the future if that's what it takes to get him to games. But more importantly, I'll be pushing that wheelchair to dinner tables and to the gatherings of streets of fans around the world. No matter what happens, it is family who's always there for you. Family are the people who never leave your side. Thank you.